Good afternoon, everyone. So, before we start, there is one instruction that the chat will be disabled on the Zoom chat option because there has been some reason. So, the chat on the what on this Zoom will be disabled. The chat on the POS app will be enabled, and same like how you're chatting here, kindly send in your questions over there so that we can answer your queries. And the discussion should go on. The flow of questions should come in. So let's keep it seamless that you keep asking questions. I will be seeing the board of studies, the questions, what you're sending, I can see it. So kindly use the BOS app. Please do not rely only on Zoom because that's a mandate that all questions has to come and it has to come on the BOS app. Yeah, seeing very few response. Need to get more response on the BOS app. I know you have to navigate between one to another, but let's do it for the benefit of everyone. Yes, good afternoon. Oh, Kevin Naroa joining from today for GST. I have not yet started only chapter 3. Is it okay if I join it from here? Yeah, should be fine because we are discussing on reverse charge. After that, we will be discussing on compensation composition scheme. So I think once we come to the composition scheme, you will understand. The initial part on 9.5 you may not understand, but it's okay. The composition levy, which we will discuss, that you will definitely understand. So, whatever lectures you have missed out, kindly go through the recordings and catch up so that you will be able to cope up with the subsequent chapters what we will study. Good. I'm able to see a lot of responses here. Okay. So, let's get into the classes. Another instruction which is very interesting for you, which I want to give you is I will give you at 3 o'clock that there is a very interesting thing which will happen today. So kindly pay attention to the whole class because there is a surprise element for you which I'll disclose at 3 o'clock. Wow, there are some questions. Sir, in RCM, point number 11, very good, Asta. You have gone through it. That's good. It is written services supplied by individual DSAs to bank. Only individual, not HUF. Yes, because it says only individual DSAs. So when it specifically uses the term individual, so it has to be an individual. HUF is also represented by a karta, right? So HUF cannot do the business of the direct selling agents. It has to be the proprietor. And since he's doing it in his personal capacity, it will always be by that individual itself. Yes, Dhanush, I can see your message. Meera Shenoy, I did not get your doubt. Can you please type in again? I can only see that you have chatted that if I've seen, is your doubt visible? It is not yet visible. Dhanush, what is your query? Meera and Dhanush, I have not yet got your queries. Code of Studies app doesn't take so much time. Okay, fine. Then. So there's no queries. Okay, only checking if the type is working. Yes, it is working. Okay. So we were discussing in the last class that apart from supplier, some other persons also will have to pay the GST, right? So we saw under 9.3 and 9.4 GST is paid under reverse charge mechanism, which is called as RCM. So instead of supplier paying, the receiver pays this. That is called as RCM. Okay. Now we'll see a transaction where neither the supplier is paying, neither the receiver is paying. Then who is paying? The other person who is involved in this transaction, who is a e-commerce operator. He will be the person who will be paying the GST. Okay. So in this e-commerce model, how it works, we have seen the model how it works, right? That there is a supplier and this supplier is there and a customer is there. These are both connected by the e-commerce operator. So that is the platform which connects the customer and the supplier. And we've seen many kind of e-commerce transactions, correct? But only specific transactions will be there, which we'll see in the next slide. Only those e-commerce operators will have to pay the GST on behalf of the supplier, right? So instead of supplier paying the tax to the government, this e-commerce operator will pay the tax to the government. Okay. So these are the specific services. First is transportation of passengers by a radio taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, motorcycle, omnibus, or any other motor vehicle. So if this is the supplier and the supplier could be any person, and if this is the service, right? And receiver can be anybody. Unlike in our RCM discussion on GTA, unlike our discussion on motor vehicle with fuel, specific recipient only has to pay, right? But in this case, whoever can be the recipient, it could be a registered person, but still the tax will be paid by the e-commerce operator. Okay. One is supplier, one is receiver, and there's an e-commerce operator. The tax on this transaction, the supply by the supplier through the e-commerce platform to the customer will be paid by the supplier itself irrespective of whether supplier is registered also. Still, supplier should not pay. The e-commerce operator has to pay. The first case, we know the example. The example is a motor cab which has been booked. How do you book cabs? So let's understand this. That first is cab, second is accommodation in hotels, third is services by way of housekeeping services, plumbing, carpentering, and fourth is supply of restaurant services. So we know this theoretically. Now, if you have to see this in real life, can you give me one example for each of these transactions? First is transportation of passengers. Second is providing accommodation in hotels and inns. Third is so okay. I'll have to use the different marker. This is first, this is second, this is third, oops, and this is fourth. First one, yes, through Ola, that we book a cab through Ola. That is the first one. Second is, any example for the second one? Okay. For third one, services by way of housekeeping. Few people have given correct answer. It is either when we book somebody through a urban club or through a urban club, or it's also called as urban company. That is example for description number three. For description number two, yes, Mahalakshmi is given. When we booked any hotels through Trivago, that's a good example. Or make my trip, right? And for the fourth one, yeah, even Oyo is an example for the second one. When you book rooms through Oyo, Yes, example for the fourth one, yes, Swiggy and Zomato. When we book anything through the Swiggy and Zomato, the restaurant person will not pay the GST. It will be by the by the Swiggy or Zomato itself. Okay. Now, in restaurant service also, any person accepts service by a restaurant eating joint located at a specified premises. What is specified premises? That is defined here. Specified premises means any premises which is providing hotel accommodation service having declared tariff of any unit of accommodation above rupees 7,500 per unit per day are equivalent, which means there is a restaurant. It is delivering food through Swiggy. For that, Swiggy will pay. Now, in that restaurant is situated in a place where they provide hotel accommodation also. That whereas the stay facility also is there. Now, when the charges for this stay, okay, the it's in located in a place where there is stay also, and in that stay there is a restaurant also. So, but that restaurant taste is so nice that even if you're not staying, you're ordering from your home. So, when you're ordering from Swiggy, now will Swiggy pay or will that hotel pay? That has to be decided by if that hotel is a big hotel or a small hotel. How do you decide if it's a big hotel or a small hotel? By the rate what they are collecting for the accommodation. For the accommodation services, if they are providing charges, they are providing hotel for providing rooms, and the room charges are say 2,000 rupees. So it's a small hotel. So if they provide any accommodation service, accommodation में वहाँ पे stay करने का, if the stay charges is more than 7,500 per day per night, 7,500, wow, it's a big amount, right? So if it is a big restaurant, if it's a big accommodation service provider, then GST will not be paid by Swiggy, it will be paid by that restaurant company itself. Why? Because it's a big restaurant, they don't need anybody else to pay. Okay. So how do you decide if it's a big restaurant or a small restaurant? If the accommodation, which is their part of the restaurant service, they are charging monthly 1,000 7,500 rupees. Okay. So that is how you will decide that if it's a big restaurant, then Swiggy and Zomato will not pay. If it is a small restaurant, Swiggy and Zomato will pay. So who will pay for the big restaurants? Where the hotel charges 7,500 per, there is a charges of per day per stay of 7,500 or more that will be paid by the restaurant companies. So जैसे Taj, Oberoi, okay, West End, these things, they charge minimum 10,000 rupees. So if that has some restaurant and you're ordering from that restaurant, you can order it. The GST will be paid by the restaurant itself and not by this e-commerce operator. 7,500 will be inclusive or exclusive of GST? Exclusive of GST. It will be just the accommodation charges, which is excluding the GST. Yeah. So we are not talking about delivery fees. We are talking about the food services. For the delivery fees, they will collect GST. That they have to, because that is the service which actually they're providing. But we are talking, Dhanush, on the food portion itself. On the food, somebody has to pay. Who will pay on the food? That is what we are discussing. But of course, on the delivery charges, GST has to be collected and that will be paid by the Swiggy company directly. Yeah, same, Mira. You can continue with these classes. please watch the video recording of the previous classes later on, because today also we are starting a new chapter. So that will be very helpful for you. And there is a interesting session which will be conducted 4 o'clock. That's why I will tell you about that in just 10 more minutes. So continue with this class. This will be helpful for you to attend the session at 4 as well. Okay. So we understood 9.5 that in these cases only the who will pay the tax? The e-commerce operator will pay the tax. In other cases, just say if you're ordering anything like most of the which e-commerce you use most commonly, you tell me. Meesho, Amazon, Flipkart. Yes. Good. So you have hanged so many options. So on Amazon, okay, if you buy anything, now say I am a supplier of shirts. I am supplying shirts through Amazon. You are a buyer, you have ordered through Amazon, and the goods have got delivered to you. Now, on this shirt, what I'm selling through Amazon, will I pay GST or will Amazon pay the GST? Link it, yes and no. I'll come back to you. Okay, so are you saying on this transaction of selling of shirt, I will not pay the GST, Amazon will pay the GST? Amazon pay? No, Amazon will not pay because Amazon is not there in any of these categories. Only in these four categories, if it is fitting that it is providing any of this service. Is Amazon providing transportation of passengers? No. Is it providing accommodation in hotels? No. Is it providing services of housekeeping? No. Is it providing service of restaurant? No. So for this example of selling the shirt, Amazon will not pay the GST. The supplier itself will pay the GST. Okay, the supplier itself will pay the GST, not the Amazon. Similarly, goes with the Flipkart. Okay, similarly with Blinkit and things like that, because they are not one of the category of the supplier who is defined under 9.5, so they will not pay. Okay, we will pay. Of course, customer has to pay, but who will pay to the government, Rajiv? That Rajveer, that is my question. Whose responsibility it is to pay taxes to the government? Arun Kumar, that 7,500 is excluding GST. If you see the term, it is mentioned providing unit accommodation at a declared tariff of any unit of accommodation above 7,500 per unit. That is the tariff, not inclusive GST, that is excluding the GST value. Yes, Anubhav, Ankush, chat is disabled on Zoom. So kindly send your queries on the BOS app itself. Got it? So very important. Once you see e-commerce, don't always assume that yes, e-commerce has to pay. Not necessary. When the transaction is between a entity which is not these four specified entities, then the supplier itself will pay the GST. Anubhav Malik, who will pay the tax to the government in case of Amazon? So Amazon, if it has any charges, say if it has providing any delivery charges, on that Amazon will pay. But on the product per se, Amazon will not pay. The supplier will pay the GST on it. Okay. Okay. So we are paying shipping charges on domestic. That will include GST. On the shipping, they will charge the GST. That will be separate, Rihanna. Boomas, could you please repeat the examples that you said for the description of services? Yes. Like first one, transportation of passengers by radio taxi, motor cab, Uber and Ola. Second, providing accommodation in hotels. You have Make My Trip, you have Trivago, you have Oyo Rooms. That is for the second one. For the third one, services by way of housekeeping such as plumbing, carpentering. Only one. Local Ramu is also one which we see in our city. Otherwise, Urban Clap is very famous there. And fourth one, supply of restaurant services will be food delivery through Swiggy, Zomato, and others. Okay, great. So that is on 9.5. Now, some clarifications on restaurant e-commerce companies. So restaurants, there were some confusions. So that's where this clarification is now coming in. It says that e-commerce will not collect TCS in restaurant services. Now, what is this e-commerce? TCS, we know e-commerce. Now, what is this TCS? Apart from these four categories which we have talked here, there could be other e-commerce operators like Amazon or a Flipkart. Now, when Amazon or Flipkart, okay, is a e-commerce operator and there is a supplier. So, e-commerce operator, which is other than these four, they will have to collect a tax called as tax collected at source on the transaction from the supplier. Okay. This is called TCS and this they will remit to the government, which can be claimed by this e-commerce operator. Now, what does this mean? It simply means that in our previous example that I am selling shirts through e-commerce operator. I am selling shirts on the Amazon. Now, on this selling of shirts, okay, what has to pay? I will charge the GST and customer will pay. But will the customer pay me directly? No. Customer will not pay me directly. Customer will pay through the e-commerce operator because they have the complete control on the payments. If he pays me, then how will Amazon know? I will have the customer. So e-commerce operator collects the amount. Now, when they collect the amount from the customer, they have to pay it to me. They will deduct their commission charges because if I'm using their platform, they will have to charge something. So they will deduct that charges. And on whatever is the value of the supply which I am doing through this e-commerce operator, on that they will deduct some percentage of TCS. Not on the value of the goods, on the tax portion. So on that tax portion, they will collect the TCS. So on this, what extra amount they will collect, that is called TCS. Why? Because there could be many suppliers who are supplying through e-commerce, but they may not pay the taxes. So the government wants to have a control saying that, okay, this person has made so much tax. Now I cannot go to so many people because we know that there are so many people and the population in India is so huge. Now they cannot go and find out who has made how much value of supplies. So they said, okay, you are supplying through e-commerce operator. No, through this e-commerce operator, I will get all your data, how much transactions you have done. So this e-commerce, when they have to deduct TDS, they have to collect the TCS. They will collect your information and how much is the TCS they will remit. I will get to know that information because they have to file a TCS return. So when they file this TCS return, I know that 1% is deducting. I will do the reverse calculation. That is 1% is equal to 10 rupees. So how much is 100%? I will get to know the value and I will see whether when you are supplying through e-commerce operator, are you disclosing this much of your turnover as GST? So that's why this all this mechanism of TCS is there so that government can collect more revenue and nobody should get escaped by paying taxes because some suppliers may supply through e-commerce operator but they may not be paying the GST. That is the reason that what we are saying is the supplier has to register on the e-commerce operator and this e-commerce operator has to deduct TCS. So in our coming back to our example, I'm selling shirt through Amazon, right? 100 rupees is the value of shirt, very less, no? 1000 rupees. 1000 rupees is the value of the shirt I am selling through Amazon. Now, tell me what all taxes will apply here and whose responsibility it is. Your tariff, Bhumika? Yeah, good question. What is the meaning of tariff? Tariff means what is the rate at which hotels rooms are available. One is actual value, one is tariff. They will say when you go to the hotel, this is my tariff, that this is my rate card. And if you negotiate, they will give you a discount. But this is the standard rate. So if the hotel is having tariff of 7,500 and if after discount they're giving at 5,000, still that on that transaction, on that restaurant services, the hotel only has to pay because their standard tariff you have to see, not tariff after discount. So you have to see the tariff itself. The definition says where the tariff value is 7,500 and above. Correct. Anubhav, you given correct answer. GST will be paid by the supplier, that is me, and TCS will be paid by the Amazon. Now that TCS, is it a loss for me? No, because that TCS will come to me as a credit. Supplier deposit GST to the government, e-commerce will pay TCS to the government. Very nice. Is it interstate of or intrastate? Didn't understand your question. Supplier will pay GST, fine. Is it interstate or interstate? Depends. If the supplier is in one state and the customer is in another state, then they will pay interstate, that is IGST transaction. If the supplier and recipient both are in one state, then they will pay CGST and SGST. GST is paid by the customer to the e-commerce operator. correct? And e-commerce operator will give it to the supplier, correct? Now, apart from that, whatever they have received from the customer, they have to pay. On the value of transaction, they will pay the TCS. That is the extra part, Kevin. Supplier's responsibility for GST. Correct, Divya. It is the supplier's responsibility for the GST. No, TCS is not a loss for us because whatever TCS will be collected, that will reflect to us. That is a credit. That's why it's called tax collected at source credit. It is a credit that when you pay your GST, you can adjust this TCS amount. So TCS is not a loss. He can claim that. Bhumika, once again, I'll explain you that a supplier supplies the good through Amazon and that goods are delivered to the customer. Supplier will give his invoice that will again be through this e-commerce itself because they will add their delivery charges. Now, when the supplier supplies the goods to the e-commerce operator, the full amount, he will charge the GST because he has to pay GST to the government. So supplier will pay GST to the government, the customer will buy the goods, he will remit the amount because he has to first pay, right? Whenever we buy anything on Amazon, we will pay it first or say cash on delivery and then they will receive the goods. So customer pays the amount to e-commerce operator. E-commerce amount will pay that money to the supplier because he has to pay the taxes to the government. Now, apart from that, on the value of the tax, that one portion which is equivalent to very less, that is 0.1%. Earlier it was 1%, now 0.1% will be collected by this e-commerce operator and they will remit it to the government. And this will come back to the supplier as a credit. So why this full chain of exercise is required? To have this tracking mechanism. That's why this complete chain has to be done. Clear, Bhumika? Now, once we know the e-commerce transaction, who has to pay GST and the TCS. So there is a clarification which says that e-commerce companies not to collect TCS in respect of restaurant service so notified. Who are notified? Those restaurants which is having transaction less than 7,500. For more than 7,500, the supplier itself will pay. In that cases, TCS has to be deducted because supplier is not a specified, okay, it's not a specified category. It's a specified category and taxes will be paid by them, not by the e-commerce operator. So e-commerce operator in normal cases need not collect TCS because they themselves are paying taxes on behalf of the supplier. E-commerce is not required to take separate registration for paying tax on restaurant service supplied through them. Okay, if e-commerce is not registered and the value is very less, for are not required to take separate registration for paying tax on restaurant services because e-commerce already are registered. Because when you have to do a e-commerce transaction, then there is no limit applicable for you. From rupee 1, you have to take registration. So when you have to take a registration from rupee 1, then you do not have to take another registration for remitting taxes on behalf of the supplier. With your same registration, you can remit it. Then e-commerce operators too pay the tax on any restaurant services supplied through them, whether it is registered or unregistered. Supply of restaurant services to be included in aggregate turnover of the person supplying restaurant services. They are paying the taxes, but whose turnover it is? E-commerce operators companies turnover. This is not e-commerce company operators turnover. This is the turnover of the restaurant company itself. Taxes is not paying, but still it is his turnover. Restaurant services provided through e-commerce not to be considered as inward supply for e-commerce liable for RCM. So they do not have to pay any reverse charge. Reversal of proportionate on ITC on input goods and services not required. When we go to ITC, we'll see that when I'm supplying something which is exempted, I have to reverse my input tax credit, but this e-commerce company need not do. GST to be paid by the supplier on services not notified under 9.5. That is on the 9.5 services. That is this four categories what we have said. On that GST will be to be paid by the supplier of services and not notified under 9.5 but supplied through e-commerce. Okay. So apart from this four categories, all other supplier has to pay. Then e-commerce to raise invoice in respect of restaurant services supplied through e-commerce. So e-commerce company only will pay the taxes on it. Billing in case of restaurant services and goods or services other than restaurant services being sold by a restaurant or customer under the same order. So if they are doing any services other than restaurant services, then that also on that also it will be part of the billing itself. Okay. Can restaurants collect service charges and what are the criteria if they are collecting? So nothing is being told here in GST law, Dhanush. That will be said in consumer law. And we are seeing practically that there are some cases which says that restaurants cannot collect service charges. Few cases are saying they can collect. So it is very litigative. But we are seeing practically that a lot of restaurants are collecting the service charges. Will e-commerce company will pay GST on delivery charges? Yes, they will pay by themselves. Supplier will not pay because delivery is the responsibility of the e-commerce operator. So they will collect the GST on the delivery charges. Yeah. Clear with e-commerce. Can we now move to the next part? Okay. Again, some clarification. If the e-commerce company is located in a taxable territory, then the person liable to pay tax is the e-commerce. If the e-commerce do not have any physical presence, say there is an e-commerce who started recently in India and they do not have a physical presence, will they deduct TCS? Yes, still they have to. They will have to appoint a person. Person liable to pay tax is the person representing the e-commerce. If the e-commerce is not registered, they do not have a physical place, but they will appoint a representative to do business in India. That person will have to pay the GST. And if the e-commerce has neither the physical presence nor having any representative, then the person liable to pay tax is a person appointed by the e-commerce for the purpose of paying the tax. So either you be here or you have a representative who will be here, or it could be that a person who is appointed e-commerce company will have to definitely appoint one person to pay the taxes. So they will appoint a person to pay it. So the moral of the story is e-commerce के ऊपर जो tax रहेगा, they cannot escape saying that they do not have a place of office in India, they are not registered in India. Those things cannot be given. So they will have to appoint a person, they will have to appoint an authorized person, then he will be liable. If they have not appointed him also, then they will have to appoint a person for the purpose of payment of taxes of GST. So without that, they will not be getting the registration. Sir, restaurant below 7,500 TCS will be collected. Above 7,500 TCS not collected. No, that's other way around, Miss P. Where the restaurant, the tariff, okay, where the accommodation tariff is below 7,500, TCS will not be collected, but taxes will be paid by this e-commerce operator. Above 7,500, e-commerce operator will not will not collect any taxes. They will only collect TCS from this supplier, and taxes will be paid by the restaurant company itself. Okay, clear on e-commerce operator. So e-commerce operator, only four categories on that GST will be paid by the e-commerce operator. On all other transactions of e-commerce operator, TCS will be collected by this our e-commerce operator folks. Clear? Okay. So let's proceed further on classification of goods and services. See, how do you classify goods and services? They've said, okay, let's go to the material so that you will grasp it very faster. Yeah. Yeah. So, how do you do classification under GST? Okay. Because why is it important? Because you have to determine the GST rate payable. That's why classification is very important under GST. Because there are multiple rates. What is the rate for your product? You have to decide. So that determination of your rate happens through classifications. So how does the classification happens? It happens in two ways. One classification is for goods, another classification is for services. So what is classification of goods? Classification of goods means identification of the chapter, heading, subheading, and tariff items in which a particular product will be classified. Where is this given? There is a rate chart, okay, GST rate. In that, they have given a classification called HSN, and they have described the product which will be taxable. So they have schedules. First schedule is 5%, second schedule is 12%, third schedule is 18%. Like this, they have schedules. So this, to decide which of your product, whether it's fall in first schedule, second schedule, third schedule of the rate notification, you have to identify the product. That is exactly called as classification. To get into classification, we have to see the section, we have to see the chapter, then the headings, then the subheadings, and then the tariff item. Now, what is the section, chapter, heading, subheading? These are all terms which is coming from GST through the customs tariff notification. Okay, through the first schedule of the customs tariff. In the first schedule of customs tariff, there is various names of the products and they are represented through a HSN. HSN means Harmonized System of Nomenclature, which is a multi-purpose international product nomenclature which is developed by World Customs Organization. So whatever customs tariff classification is there, that is globally the same because it is all adopted by all the countries to this World Customs Organization. Okay, so it will be universally the same. That comprises of 5,000 groups. So many products are there because it could be industrial product, it could be what products we use, some products which we don't know, but rate has to be there. That's why there are about 5,000 commodity groups. Each are identified by a 6-digit code. A HSN code is how long? It's a 6-digit code which is arranged in a legal and logical structure. That is starts with 1 and ends with 99 and is supported by a well-defined rules. India, but India has extended that 6 to 2 more digits. So we have 8 digits HSN codes. So when we say HSN code, it means classification code and they are up to the 8-digit codes in India. Globally, it is only 6 digits. India has added 2 more digits to give some more clarity. Now, in this customs classification, there is sections, there is chapters, there is heading, there is subheading, and then the tariff item. Okay, don't straight away go to the tariff item. Go to the sections, then go to the chapters, then go to the headings, and then the subheadings, and then you will get the tariff item. From there, you have to do the identification. So you have to follow this process. Along with the lines of HSN, the Indian customs tariff has a set of rules of interpretation. So, whatever rules of interpretation we have to follow because we have to analyze this. So, when we analyze, we have to follow the rules for interpretation that will be applicable. Whatever rules of interpretation applies under the customs, that will be applicable to GST also because GST has not developed, the GST portal or the GST law has not developed new HSN codes because these HSN codes are globally accepted and it is already there under the Customs Tariff Act. So when it is already there under the Customs Tariff Act, I do not have to repeat it. So whatever is there under the customs tariff, that is adopted under GST. Okay. Whatever is the customs classification under Customs Act, that itself is the thing what I am using for my GST. So GST is borrowing the classification from the Customs Act. So consequently, under GST, goods are classified on the basis of HSN in accordance with the rules of interpretation of the customs tariff. Then classification of services. So goods, very simple, HSN code, whatever is there under customs that we can utilize. But for services, a new scheme of classification has been devised because there was no classification for services. Goods we have been importing. So from beginning, very, very old times also, we have the import of goods through HSN. So there was a classification under customs. But for services, there is no kind of classification. So that's why they're saying a new scheme of classification of services has been divided under GST. It is a modified version of United Nations Central Product Classification. Under this scheme, the services of various description, whatever services you provide, that is being described under 99. So first you have 99 main chapter, then 995, 995, 996, 997, 998, and 999. Okay, so this will be the classification. 99 will be the main chapter for services because till 98, all goods are covered. Starting from chapter number 1, 2, 3, ending with 96, 97, 98, all goods are classified there. So 99, what was left out, is coming as classification for services. Now, this includes what? Within section 99, within chapter 99, there are sections. Now, this section, section 5, is for construction services. Within this, you might have more detailing. But to know where you have to go, you have to navigate, right? So first you will see the section. If there is construction services, then you'll go to section 5. If there is any distributed trade services, accommodation, food services, you'll go to section 6. If there's any financial related services, real estate services, then you'll go to section 7. And if there's any business and production services, you'll go to section 8. And section 9, you'll go for any community, social and personal services. So that is how the classification of service happens. There also it happens through chapter, section, heading, group, and tariff item. That is how the classification works. If a person booked the bus through Red Bus app, then the GST will be paid with the Red Bus. Yes, because it is classifiable in terms of when you see the Red Bus. Let us see what is the classification what they've used. It says only transportation of passengers by a radio taxi, motor cab, maxi cab. They have not said any bus. They've said only taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, motorcycle, omnibus, or any other motor vehicle. So buses, when you do on that flip on this, the e-commerce companies will not pay. The supplier only will pay it. Okay, that was on classification. Okay. Goods have HSN from 1 to 98. Services has chapters 99 and 5 sections. Then service rates. What are the GST rates? 0.75%, 2.5%, 3.75%, 6%, 9%, 14%. ये rates of सुना हुआ नहीं है because I have divided that by half. This is CGST rates. Then you have to make it double for the same rate for SGST. So C and S. So restaurant services, GTS services will have 2.5 plus 2.55%. Gambling, admission to entertainment events, service by race club, that will be the highest rate. That is 14 plus 14, 28%. And services which is not specified will have a general rate of 18%. So GST rate on any services which you consume will be 18% on all other services. Okay. So this is the standard rate. Whenever somebody asks you what is the rate on services, you should tell the standard rate is 2.5 plus 2.5, that is 5%. Sorry, 9% plus 9%, 18%. The standard rate for services will be 18%. If there is any other identification, then it will be different. If there is no specific identification, then the rate will be 18% for services. Okay. Now, what is the GST rate on specifically housing projects? That is on real estate transactions. The GST rate on real estate transactions says that it is taxable at two rates, 1% rate and 5% rate. That's all. Now, 1% is for what? 1% is for new affordable housing projects. Okay. Where the area is less than 60 square meters. Then it will be called as affordable housing project. So two criteria they have to see for affordable housing project. Area should be less than 60 square meters in metros and 90 square meters in non-metros, and the value should be less than 45 lakhs. If the value of the apartment is 45 lakhs and the area is less than 60 or 90 square meters, then it is treated as an affordable housing project. If it is a affordable housing project, then the GST rate is 1%. If it's a non-affordable housing project, then the GST rate is 5%. So 1% applies to new affordable housing projects and any ongoing projects which is opting for new rates, because this came in with effect from 1st April 2019. So ongoing projects means where the project were still getting constructed as on 1st April 2019. They were given option whether you want to go with the old GST rate or the new rate. Whenever they opted for the new rate, that's when it was 1% if it was affordable housing, and 5% when it is non-affordable housing and new other than affordable housing projects and projects where the commercial space is less than 15%, wherein only they're building a full building, 85% is residential, 15% is non-residential, then it will be treated as non-affordable housing. And that area will of course be greater. If the area is more than 60 or 90 square meters and the value is more than 45 lakhs. Clear? What are the conditions? ITC will not be available. See, already the GST rate is as high as 18%. For housing, they're reducing so much less. For affordable 1% and for normal houses, 5%. So when I'm reducing the rate, don't ask me for input tax credit. That is what the government is saying. I have reduced the rate to such an extent. So kindly pay this. Don't ask for any ITC. So when you don't ask for ITC, people will not make purchases from a genuine buyer. They will buy things from an unregistered person, because if I have to charge GST to them, that will become a cost to them because they cannot claim the ITC and their output is independent of whatever GST rate I charge them. Correct? So that's why they've said that 80% of the inputs are input services, which is procured from registered person. So when you do any sales for 1 year, you have to see in that how much purchases you made. If you made purchases from registered person and unregistered person, you have to bifurcate. At least of the total input, what you're taking, total purchases, what you're making, 80% of those purchases should be from a registered person. Even though you will not get the credit, but you should not get into some other transactions. That's why they're saying that 80% of the inputs or your total input services should be procured from registered person only. And if not, if you're not procuring 80% from uh, registered persons, then say you have procured only 70% from registered persons and you had to purchase 80%. So what is the difference then? 10%. On the 10%, the builder, because who is doing the building? The builder is doing. The builder will pay GST at 18% under reverse charge mechanism. Now, if that shortage is belonging to cement purchases, if you have purchased from the unregistered cement seller, he is not charging you GST. Then, so if it is shortage of cement, then under reverse charge, you have to pay 28%. Clear? This is the GST rate on housing projects. We have to pay under RCM. Yes, the builder. This is on the builder. Yes, Sejal, this I will upload it. This. What we decide affordable based on 60 and 90 and 45 lakhs. Okay. So after, yeah, I will upload this so that you can see this. So our next topic in this, so this is what is called as supply of service under 9(4), because the buyer has to pay GST. This is called as GST under reverse charge, which the builder has to pay. This is exactly given under 9(4) that the buyer has to pay. Now we'll take few MCQs, then we'll break for the next chapter. Now MCQ, which of the following is treated as interstate supply? Very simple. First one answer is B. Right. Second question. First one is D. Second, getting varied answer. Somebody is saying A. Exempt supply means supply of any goods or services which attracts nil rate of tax. Only that. Or even non-taxable supplies are also treated as exempt. In the definition of exempt supply, we know that it is nil rated of tax or wholly exempt, and even non-taxable supply is included. So the correct answer is C, both A and B. Okay. Third question. Gayatri, where did you get the definition? Yes. ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು correct answer for third is extends to the whole of India, not B, because Jammu and Kashmir is not excluded. Even Jammu and Kashmir is part of the GST. Other acts, if you see service tax, that said it extends to the whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. But GST extends to the whole of India. Fourth one, which of the following falls under reverse charge mechanism? Answer is D, because all all of these are there under reverse charge mechanism. Last MCQ. Yes, Sejal. Nil rate of supply, we have discussed this. Nil rate of supply means a supply where in the tariff the rate is mentioned as nil. That is nil rate of supply. Second is exempt supply, which is taxable, but through a notification, they have given the exemption. So there is a notification which says that these are the services which are exempted. That is called as second category exempted. Third is non-taxable supply, which is there under Schedule 3, 5 petroleum products, right? Schedule 3 is not taxable. And 5 petroleum products and alcoholic liquor for human consumption, they are mentioned in the Section 7 itself. So they are not taxable. Section 9, sorry. So whatever is not taxable under Section 9, they are called as non-taxable supply. But all of this is included in the definition of exempt supply. Okay, answer for question number 5 looks tricky. No, exempt supply will not get taxable. Yeah, can be, because if they withdraw the exemption, if they say that some item was exempted, now they're withdrawn. So in that case, it can become taxable, but not necessary that everything will become taxable. If it is withdrawn, like alcoholic liquor for human consumption or that 5 petroleum products, that will become taxable because that will be taxable in the future. Yeah, correct answer for 5. Which of the scenarios fall under the scope of Schedule 3? Director's remuneration, which is declared as salaries in the books of accounts and subject to DDS under 192. Only this is there under Schedule 3, because Schedule 3 is what? Any transaction provided by a employer to the employee. Okay. Any transaction by an employee provided to the employer, services between an employee giving to the employer, only that is there in Schedule 3. So, with respect to other things are there, but with respect to this question, employee or employment, when it is there, it will be under Schedule 3. Okay. So, the answer is A, not both A and B, because in second scenario, TDS is deducted under 194J. So, we discussed this, right, under reverse charge. When it is under 194J, then TDS, then RCM will apply. When RCM will apply, then it will not be part of Schedule 3. Correct? So you have to look at both Schedule 3 perspective and reverse charge perspective. In this case, there will not be reverse charge also. Why? Any employer, employee to employer, it is not taxable at all. So if it is not taxable, forward charge will not come. And if it is exempted, reverse charge also will not come. Both are not applicable. So the correct answer is A. Okay. Any doubts here? Okay. If there are no doubts, then we will take a break and come back in 10 minutes time. Okay. So we have discussed on reverse charge, charges to be paid by e-commerce operator. Now let's see the last topic on charge. Okay. Now we have seen that to levy any taxes, there has to be a charge. Charge is there under section 9. 9 says tax to be paid by the supplier on the value and at a specified rate, and it should be paid by the person who is supplying the goods. That is 9.1 and 9.2. Then 9.3 and 9.4 said that in certain situations where the notification is issued, their tax shall be paid by the recipient. And 9.5 says that tax shall be paid by the e-commerce operator. Correct? So this we have understood. Now we'll go to the specific things. Now, when you say somebody to pay taxes, they will be little adamant saying that no, I'm a small businessman, I cannot pay 18%. I cannot file my GST returns on a monthly basis. And if I do not get the input tax credit, then I'm at a loss, right? So they will come up with so many reasons. So the government has come up with a scheme saying that, okay, we understand that you are a small trader. Now you are not able to pay taxes, and whenever you sell anything, it is all inclusive of taxes. आप जब भी कुछ बेचते हो, आपका पूरा टैक्स इंक्लूड हुआ रहता है. ठीक है. तो फिर क्या करना है उस केस में? बोलोगे कि गवर्नमेंट अब हमारी मदद कीजिए. तो इसीलिए ये कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम आया है. ठीक है. सो दैट इज द रीजन दिस कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम हैज कम, सेइंग दैट whenever whenever the supplier is not able to pay or the supplier wants some scheme, so we'll give him a scheme. Now this is called as composition scheme. Okay. Okay. So composition scheme said that this is, firstly, don't get confused with composite supply and composition scheme. The terminology is same. It is composite supply. This is composition. It sounds same, but that is a composite supply, wherein whether two supplies has to be treated as a composite supply or mixed supply was decided under the composite or mixed supply classification. Now, this is not that. This is a composition scheme. There is a difference between composite supply and composition scheme. In composition scheme, supplier only will pay the GST. It will not shift to the recipient, but instead of supplier paying 18%, 12%, 28%, he will pay a lower rate. That is the scheme. ठीक है. तो ये कॉम्पोजिट स्कीम जो हमने पढ़ा वो अलग है, कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम अलग है. कॉम्पोजिट सप्लाई जो है, जो दो सप्लाई को आप अलग नहीं कर सकते, उसे कहते हैं कॉम्पोजिट सप्लाई. लेकिन कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम ऐसा स्कीम है जो सप्लायर को कंपोजिट सप्लाई या मिक्स सप्लाई में जाने की जरूरत है. जो भी सप्लाई करेगा उसे थोड़ा स्मॉल परसेंटेज ऑफ जीएसटी देना पड़ेगा. उसे कहते हैं कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम. ठीक है. नाउ कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम क्या है? कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम है कि आपको पूरा 18% देना नहीं पड़ेगा, आपको छोटा परसेंटेज देना पड़ेगा, एज लो एज 1%. ये क्या बोलता है? कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर गुड्स. कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर गुड्स अलग हो गया, कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर सर्विसेज हो गया. काफी इंपॉर्टेंट है ये, दैट there is a composition scheme for goods which is covered under 10.1 and 10.2. This is for goods. And composition scheme for services is there under 10.2A. जब भी हम composition scheme का बात करेंगे, हम या तो फिर गुड्स का बात करेंगे या फिर कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर सर्विसेज बात करेंगे। जब कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर सर्विसेज रहेगा तब वो रहेगा अंडर सेक्शन 10 सबसेक्शन 2A। और जब गुड्स का रहेगा तब होगा सेक्शन 10 सबसेक्शन 1 या 10 सबसेक्शन 2। ठीक है। अगर 10(1) में है कोई सप्लायर, अब वो सप्लायर अगर मैन्युफैक्चरर है, ठीक है, तब वो 10(1) या 10(2) में ही रहेगा। और 10(1) में रहेगा तो मैन्युफैक्चर होगा और वो कितना जीएसटी पे करेगा? सिर्फ 1%। ठीक है। कितना? सिर्फ 1% पे करेगा। 0.5% CGST, 0.5% SGST। और ट्रेडर जो है, ट्रेडर भी क्या करेगा? 1% पे करेगा। ऑफ व्हाट? मैन्युफैक्चर पे करेगा 1% ऑफ द टर्नओवर इन द स्टेट। और ट्रेडर क्या पे करेगा? टर्नओवर ऑफ टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज इन द स्टेट। फर्क है, दोनों में काफी फर्क है। दोनों का परसेंटेज 1% है, लेकिन अंतर काफी है। काफी अंतर है क्योंकि ये 1% किसके ऊपर पे कर रहा है? ऑन द टोटल टर्नओवर। ये बोलता है टर्नओवर इन द स्टेट, और ये बोलता है फॉर ट्रेडर टर्नओवर ऑफ टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज। तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? यहाँ पे हमको फर्क दिख गया। ट्रेडर जो है सिर्फ टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज के ऊपर 1% पे करेगा। मैन्युफैक्चर जो है सभी टर्नओवर पे करेगा। मतलब अगर ट्रेडर जो टैक्सेबल गुड्स है और एग्जेम्प्ट गुड्स भी सप्लाई करता है तो वो 1% पे करेगा सिर्फ टैक्सेबल गुड्स पे। लेकिन मैन्युफैक्चरर मैन्युफैक्चर करता है टैक्सेबल गुड्स और ट्रेडेड गुड्स, टैक्सेबल गुड्स और एग्जेम्प्टेड गुड्स, फिर भी वो 1% टैक्सेबल गुड्स और एग्जेम्प्ट गुड्स सभी के ऊपर पे करे। ऐसा क्यों? क्योंकि लॉ में ये डेफिनेशन दिया गया है 1% ऑफ द टर्नओवर इन द स्टेट। तो मतलब पूरा टर्नओवर हो गया। टर्नओवर का मतलब हो गया पूरा टर्नओवर। मैन्युफैक्चर पे करेगा 1% ऑफ द टोटल टर्नओवर, ट्रेडर पे करेगा 1% ऑफ द टर्नओवर ऑफ टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज ऑफ गुड्स और सर्विसेज इन द स्टेट। और थर्ड कैटेगरी है ऑन गुड्स में ही, इवन दो रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज है, लेकिन फिर भी उन्होंने 10(2) में ही उसको दिया है कि रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज जो है, जो रेस्टोरेंट सर्विस प्रोवाइड करते हैं, जो होटल बेचने वाले हैं, जो होटल सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करते हैं, वो पे करेंगे 5%, जो है 2% प्लस 2%। जब भी आप होटल जाते हो तब आप देखोगे वहां पे आपको 5% जीएसटी लगता है। ठीक है, दैट इज कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर गुड्स। अब कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम फॉर सर्विसेज सेज दैट यू हैव टू पे, सर्विसेज के ऊपर आपको 6% पे करना है। यू डोंट हैव टू पे 18%। नॉर्मली सर्विस के ऊपर 18% रहता है, लेकिन आपको यहाँ पे सिर्फ 6% पे करना है। To explain this again in English, the composition scheme are divided in two categories. One is composition scheme for goods and another one is composition scheme for services. For goods, it could be a manufacturer, trader, or a restaurant service provider. If it's a manufacturer, he'll pay 1%, trader also will pay 1%. The differentiation between this to 1% is manufacturer pays 1% of the total turnover, trader pays 1% of the turnover of taxable supplies of goods, and restaurant service provider pays 5% of the total restaurant services. A composition scheme for services pays GST at 6%. 6% of the services what is provided. Okay. So that is the main thing. Now, whatever turnover I have, on everything I have to pay this? No. There is a limit. But have you understood the rates till here? Clear, Dhanush? GST on trader is wider than GST on manufacturer? No, it is other way around. GST on manufacturer is wider than GST on trader, because trader will pay only on taxable, manufacturer pays on taxable and non-taxable also. Because when the law came in, Dhanush, this restaurant service provider was part of the composition. So that's why they are continuing in that. They have not moved it to a different, because the general rate for composition for services is 6%, but for restaurant they wanted to give 5%. That's why it is still continuing under composition scheme for goods classification itself. Now, composition scheme, this is a voluntary scheme. This is not a compulsory scheme. So if you want, you can opt. This is not a compulsory scheme. If you feel that you want to go with the regular scheme, go to the regular scheme, claim your input tax credit, pay taxes on your outward supply. So this is a voluntary scheme and this is optional, not a compulsion which is given to you. What are the benefits? The benefits to go under this scheme is you have to pay only taxes quarterly. You have to pay the taxes quarterly at specified rates, but without claiming input tax credit. You cannot claim any input tax credit. You do not have to file your returns monthly. You have to only go for payment monthly. You have to go for quarterly payment of taxes and only one annual return. You do not have to file monthly or quarterly returns. You have to file only one return. And there's no need of classification because whatever you supply, the rate will be 1%. And for services, it will be 6%. Turnover limit, that is up to what turnover you can claim the scheme. When your aggregate turnover calculated on all India PAN basis is up to 1.5 crores in the preceding financial year. Your turnover in the preceding financial year should be up to 1.5 crores. And in case of those special category states, it should be up to 75 lakhs because the registration threshold limit also is less. Similarly, composition scheme threshold also is less for them. In case of these eight special category states, the limit for composition is 75 lakhs. Okay. And this is the turnover for the previous year. And even for the current year, you should do only this much. If you cross, then what happens? Will you pay GST on all the turnover? No. Up to 1.5 crores or up to 75 lakhs, you will pay under this composition scheme. Once you cross, you will pay under regular GST rate. Now, this is the limit for goods and restaurant services. But for composition scheme for services, the limit is only 50 lakhs. Here again, there is no classification for special category states. 50 lakhs for anybody who is having registration in any state. Okay, so 1.5 crore for goods and 50 lakhs for services. Why composition taxpayer cannot collect GST? Yes, one of the condition is under this composition scheme, they cannot collect taxes. We'll see under the conditions that the composition scheme supplier, he cannot collect taxes. So when we see that restaurant services, they will not be registered. We see that you're saying 5% here, but some restaurants are collecting GST. So they're not registered under composition scheme because the GST rate is same for restaurant service providers even if they are not under composition. So if they be under composition, they cannot collect it from the customer. So they are going with the regular scheme where the GST rate on normal regular restaurant services is also 5% itself. What is the disadvantage for a composition taxpayer? He cannot claim input tax credit and he cannot collect the taxes from the customer. These are the two important disadvantages. Had it been a normal supplier, he can claim the credit. And if his credit is more than his sales, then he will not pay any GST anytime. That's the reason for a regular person who is having more input tax credit, a normal scheme will be better than a composition scheme. And once I opt, should I continue till I discontinue? Yes. Till you discontinue, you have to continue with the scheme. Anytime in between, can you discontinue? Yes. If you feel that this scheme is not beneficial, you had a turnover of 50 lakhs, and you will feel that you'll have some more turnover, which is still below 1.5 crores, but you don't want to continue with the scheme, you can convert. But from regular to normal, if you have to, from regular scheme to composition, if you want to move it, you're registered. Now you feel your turnover is not touching very high and you're paying a lot of taxes. You want to switch into the scheme, you can switch in, but that switch in cannot happen anytime. From from composition to regular, you can do it anytime. But from regular to composition, you can do only on the beginning of the year. That is before 31st of March, you have to opt for composition scheme. Okay. Aggregate turnover. We have to see the aggregate turnover should not cross 1.5 crores. So what is this aggregate turnover? This includes taxable supplies. It includes exempt supplies. It includes also the exports of goods or services and interstate supplies. So whatever is your total turnover, it could be taxable, non-taxable, everything put together is your aggregate turnover. And this excludes value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge. That is, whatever taxes you pay under reverse charge, that is not to be included. Value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge is not to be included. You have to pay reverse charge. Doesn't say you do not have to pay. You have to pay, but you should not include in the value of your aggregate turnover because that is not your turnover, that is the supplier's turnover. Also, taxes what you pay should not be included. So this 1.5 crores previous year turnover, what you are saying, that it should be the total turnover before taxes. Explanation to section 10 says it includes value of supply from 1st April of the financial year up to the date of becoming liable for registration. That limit you have to see. And it excludes specifically, this is a special addition, that it excludes value of interest or discount of deposits, loans, or advances. Whatever deposits you have given, suppose you have given deposit to one of the banks, or you have given to anybody and he's giving you interest. You have given it as a deposit to a bank, or you have given as a loan to somebody, and they're giving you interest. That value should not be included. So two exclusions: reverse charge, of course, GST you cannot include, and any kind of interest amount received or any discount received on deposits, loans, or advances. Then you should not include it in your aggregate turnover. Clear? So why is this calculation required? Because you have to see that this aggregate should not be more than 1.5 crores in your previous year, neither in this year. Okay. Now that is aggregate turnover. And we have said that you have to pay 1% of the turnover in a state or union territory. What is that? That is same like previous thing. You will pay 1% of taxable supplies and 1% of the exempt supplies. Export of goods, you don't have to pay. Interstate supplies, you don't have to pay. You will pay on your taxable supplies and your exempt supplies. Who will pay this? Manufacturer, because manufacturer says that 1% of the total turnover. of the turnover in the state. So taxable and exempt supplies are happening in the state. But for a trader, they've said only taxable turnover or taxable supplies. So you will include only taxable supplies. You will not include exempt supplies. Clear distinction? Did you get it here? जैसे हमने फर्स्ट स्लाइड में देखा था कि ट्रेडर जो है 1% ऑफ द टैक्सेबल सप्लाई देगा और मैन्युफैक्चरर जो है 1% ऑफ द टोटल सप्लाईज इन अ स्टेट. तो वही सेम यहाँ पे बता रहे हैं कि मैन्युफैक्चरर जो है 1% ऑफ टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज और एग्जेम सप्लाईज इन दोनों के ऊपर देगा, लेकिन ट्रेडर जो है सिर्फ टैक्सेबल सप्लाई पे देगा. ठीक है, वहां पे भी इनवर्ट सप्लाईज को ऊपर वो रिवर्स चार्ज पे नहीं करेगा, टैक्स इंक्लूडिंग सेस के ऊपर नहीं पे करेगा और इंटरेस्ट के ऊपर भी पे नहीं करेगा. क्लियर है यहां तक? Yes, Rajita, that thing what I was saying you that is at around 4:50 you will have Swati madam coming in and she will explain or ask you questions on this. So that is what I was referring to. Why did you cut the 2 points? Are they not included? Correct. Because in this turnover, see, there are two slides. One is aggregate turnover. In aggregate turnover, all four are considered. In turnover in a state, only two are considered. So to give you that distinction, I have erased these two. तो ये दोनों कब इंक्लूड होगा? एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में इंक्लूड होगा, लेकिन इन दोनों के ऊपर टैक्स पे करने की जरूरत नहीं है. करेक्ट. यू डोंट हैव टू मेंशन इट. And for restaurant service, there's nothing like this. Whatever restaurant service is providing on that 5%. Because restaurant service taxable exempt, there is no differentiation. Clear? Now, what are the things, conditions to be fulfilled? Registered person who is not eligible for composition. Now, we said that anybody can register, but they have given a list saying that who all are not eligible for composition scheme. The following people are not eligible. Person who are making any supply of goods which are not leviable to tax. अगर tax leviable नहीं है तो फिर आपको scheme भी applicable नहीं है. So this will be applicable to only to such traders, manufacturers, service providers or restaurant services where their supply is taxable. If it is not leviable to tax, then you don't have to come into the scheme. Person making any interstate outward supply of goods. Any interstate outward. अगर आपने कुछ interstate कर दिया है, if you're doing any interstate transaction, then you're out of the scheme. एक भी transaction आपने interstate कर दिया है, then you are not eligible for the composition scheme. Then person supplying goods or services through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect TCS. Then manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, aerated water, fly ash bricks, and these purple are not eligible for the scheme. A casual taxable person. We are going from one state to another state, and in that state you want to register under the composition scheme, you will not be eligible. So casual taxable person is not eligible for the scheme. Or and A person who is under composition scheme, he has to pay taxes under 93 or 94. We saw 93 or 94. One of the services was, for example, legal services. Now, a composition person is using a lawyer services. On that, he has to pay GST at 18% because on his outward supplies, the composition rate applies. On his inward supply, he will not get the composition rate. Full GST he has to pay. And on that, he cannot claim the credit also. On that, he cannot claim the credit because a supplier under composition scheme cannot claim the input tax credit. And supply of services, can he do? Yes, he can do minimal supply of services, which is called as marginal supply of service. That we'll see. But thoda bahut service, he can do it. So supply of services to some extent is possible. Here, now we will see what all are the conditions for a composition scheme. This is for not eligible for composition scheme for goods. Now we'll see a person who is not eligible for composition scheme for services. Person making any supply of goods which are not taxable, he is not eligible. Person making any interstate outward supply of goods or services, he is not eligible. Person supplying goods or services through an e-commerce operator, he cannot. Supply of notified services, he cannot, which is not yet notified. A casual taxable person, and he has to pay tax under 93 or 94. Same like goods, but those specific category of goods is not there for them because they are dealing in purely services. Now, this marginal supply of services, what we have discussed, saying that any supplier who's supplying goods and his turnover is say 1 crore. If he wants to do some services, can he do it? Yes, he can do it. How much? He can do service value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year. In the preceding financial year, whatever was his turnover, 10% of that or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Okay. So, if you need to understand this, you need to understand with the example. A is under composition scheme for goods. Okay. Now his we'll see the turnover in 22-23 and 23-24. His turnover in 22-23 was 90 lakhs. And in 23-24, it is 1.2 crores. Okay. Now, how much service he can do in this year? Services can be provided. Tell me for both the years, for 22-23 and 23-24. Come on, I'm not getting any answers. Bhumika is saying 90,000 and 1,20,000 wrong. 5 lakhs and 6 lakhs, that is also wrong. 9 lakhs and 12 lakhs, wrong. Less than 9 lakhs, that is also wrong. 'Less than 12 lakhs for 23, 24. Wrong, 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 wrong. So please read this. It is 10% service value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year, or 5 lakh, whichever is higher. So for 22, 23, services can be provided. In the previous year turnover, we don't know. So consider it as zero. 0 or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher, which is 5 lakhs. So this year he can do services up to 5 lakhs. And for 23, 24, he can do 5 lakhs or 10% of the turnover of the preceding years. 90 lakhs ka 10% is 9 lakhs. So 9 lakhs or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. So he can do services up to 9 lakh rupees. Clear? So you have to see the turnover in the preceding year and not the turnover in the current year, because this year you have not yet completed. That's why the law also says consider the turnover of the previous year and that then 10% of that. ठीक है, तो जो भी पिछले साल का टर्नओवर है उसका 10% या 5 लाख, जो भी ज्यादा है, वो वैल्यू तक का सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर सकता है। अब 22-23 में टर्नओवर 90 lakhs है, तो फिर हमको कितना सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर सकता है कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम वाला? 5 lakhs या 10% ऑफ द टर्नओवर ऑफ द प्रीसीडिंग ईयर। इसमें हमको पता नहीं है प्रीसीडिंग ईयर कितना है, तो फिर प्रीवियस ईयर का टर्नओवर ले लेंगे 0, उसका 10% हो जाएगा 0, और 5 lakhs कौन सा ज्यादा है? 5 lakhs, तो इसलिए 22-23 में 5 लाख, और 23-24 में 90 lakhs का 10% क्या हो गया? 9 lakhs। सो 9 lakhs और 5 lakhs, जो भी ज्यादा हो, 9 लाख ज्यादा है, तो इस साल ये 9 लाख तक का सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर सकता है। ठीक है, so that is what we are saying. Then इतना तक का he can do services, and in his invoice he has to give a disclosure. What disclosure he has to give? He has to give a disclosure that he is a composition dealer, and he will issue a bill of supply instead of invoice, क्योंकि वो invoice कौन raise करता है? Who is collecting taxes? But a composition taxpayer cannot collect any taxes, so he will issue a document called as bill of supply, and he has to give a disclosure that I am a composition taxable person, not eligible to collect taxes on my supplies. Okay, and wherever his GST number is getting displayed in the notice board and sign board, he has to mention the GST number, and he has to mention composition taxpayer. That is the disclosure part. Now, when will he intimate that he is opting for composition scheme? When you're taking new registration. When you're taking a new registration, you have to, in part B of GST REG1, जब हम registration करेंगे तब हम समझेंगे REG1 क्या है. But for now, understand that REG1 is a registration application. When you apply for GST registration, you have to fill a form called as GST REG01. So when you fill this form GST REG01, in part A, you will give your mobile number, email ID, and PAN number. In part B of your form GST REG1, you have to mention whether you are applying for composition scheme or regular scheme. Okay. So here you have to mention whether you are opting for regular scheme or composition scheme. So when you're taking new registration, very simple. That when is your effective date when you get registration. So this is simple case for new registration. ठीक है, बट योर एग्जिस्टिंग रजिस्टर्ड, यू आर अ रेगुलर रजिस्ट्रेशन, आप 5 साल से नॉर्मल रजिस्ट्रेशन कर रहे हो, अब आपको कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम में जंप करना है. कैन यू जंप इन? यस, यू कैन जंप इन. आपको नॉर्मल से कॉम्पोजिशन में जाना है तो जा सकते हो. यू हैव टू फाइल इंटीमेशन इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली एंड स्टेटमेंट ऑफ स्टॉक विद इन द 60 डेज ऑफ फाइनेंशियल ईयर. क्यों स्टॉक आपका डिस्क्लोज करना है? बिकॉज जब भी आप कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम में थे, करेक्ट, आपको इनपुट क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता था. नाउ व्हेन यू गो फ्रॉम, व्हेन यू आर अंडर रेगुलर स्कीम, आपको स्टॉक पे क्रेडिट मिलता था. लेकिन जब व्हेन यू मूविंग टू कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम, आपको क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा, तो फिर आपके स्टॉक के ऊपर जो क्रेडिट है वो भी आपको रिवर्स करना पड़ेगा. दैट्स वे you have to file an intimation electronically that you want to opt for composition scheme, and you have to file a statement of stock within 60 days of the financial year. What will be the effective date? The effective date from moving from regular to composition scheme will always be the beginning of the financial year. Clear? It will always be the beginning of the financial year only. 10% turnover of the goods or services? Yes, Ankush, it will be 10% of the turnover of the goods and services. Total turnover of the previous year when they say total turnover itself. Another question, if you have 10 branches in 10 different states, can you opt for composition for one and opt not for other states? Will that be fine? You cannot. If you're opting for composition in one registered office, You have to apply for composition in every state. ओके, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। अगर आपके 10 अलग अलग ब्रांचेस है, तो फिर आपको एक जगह पे कॉम्पोजिशन हो तो हर जगह पे कॉम्पोजिशन कंपलसरी लेना ही पड़ेगा, वरना आप वो एक जगह पे भी नहीं ले सकते हो। It says value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory. So it is turnover of state and of goods and services both put together. So Ankush, it is both goods and services. Correct. In the mid of the year, you cannot take it. You can opt for composition scheme only when we are taking fresh registration, or you can apply it at the beginning of the year. If you're having existing registration, you will get moved to composition. The effective date will be from the beginning of the financial year. So the window to apply for composition generally starts from January. So Jan, Feb, March, within that, you can make a application for composition scheme. Okay. Now, what is the validity? How long will the scheme be valid? Unless it is withdrawn by the taxpayer. मतलब आपको हर सालों साल जाके इंटीमेशन देने की जरूरत नहीं है. Once you take a composition scheme, okay, unless you are withdrawing by yourself, then it will be continuing permanently. So unless you withdraw or the officer withdraws it. So withdrawal by a taxpayer who ceases to satisfy any of the previous conditions, any of the prescribed condition, shall file an intimation for withdrawal within 7 days of the occurrence of the event. मतलब you have crossed the threshold limit. The limit for goods, composition scheme for goods was 1.5 crores, and composition scheme for services was 50 lakhs. So if you have crossed this limit, then within 7 days of this occurrence, you have to file that intimation saying that I have crossed the limit. And you have to pay the regular taxes for every taxable supply thereafter. Once you cross the limit, then you're opting out of the scheme. You're not opting out of the registration. So your registration will continue from being composition, you're moving out to regular scheme. Effective date of withdrawal shall be the date of intimation mentioned, because once you mention that I want to withdraw, the officer may take time to approve it. So till then, will you be under composition? No. Because when you applied for termination, when you applied for moving out of the scheme, from that date itself, you're out of the composition scheme and you are under the regular scheme. Okay. But it has to be in the present year, cannot be in the previous year. If you make delay in making the intimation, you can do it. Do a delay, but it can't be that previous year you had moved out, you have crossed the limit, now you are applying. It should be within this current financial year. Then withdrawal of a taxpayer who intends to withdraw from the said scheme. One is who is getting out because of he's crossed the limit. Another one is voluntary. Withdrawal by a taxpayer who intends to withdraw. Can he withdraw? Yes. He should file an application before the date of such withdrawal, and effective date of withdrawal shall be the date of intimation mentioned, but it has to be in the present year, and it cannot be in the previous year. तो अगर आपको कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम से बाहर निकलना है तो आप निकल सकते हो, देर इज नो रेस्ट्रिक्शन, लेकिन विद इन टाइम करना पड़ेगा आपको। पुराने साल का विड्रॉल इस साल नहीं कर सकते हो। तो अगर आपको इस साल में विड्रॉ करना है तो आपको अप्लाई विड्रॉल का इसी साल में करना पड़ेगा। Composition to regular also effective date is beginning of the financial year. No. From regular to composition, Gayatri, it is beginning of the financial year. From composition to regular, it can be anytime in between the year also. Just file an application before such withdrawal. Clear? Okay. Validity of composition scheme, denial of option by tax authorities where the proper officer has reason to believe that the person is not eligible for composition levy or the person has contravened. Okay, because you may apply for composition, but you may not be eligible for the composition scheme, and the officer has got some information. Then what he will do? He will issue a notice, which is called as show cause notice. That is, before canceling, he has to give you one opportunity. That opportunity is given through this principle called principle of natural justice, and he will give you a show cause notice. Once he gives you a show cause notice, a reply has to be filed by the taxable person. Once a reply has been filed, then the officer will pass an order, either accepting your reply saying that okay, I've satisfied that you are correct person, I will not cancel it, or he will say no, your reply is not correct, you are still not eligible, you have to get out of composition. He will pass such an order. Okay. What will be the effective date? The effective date will be from a date which can be a retrospective date, which can be a old date. He is giving you an intimation today, but he can say no, from the date when you are registered itself, you are not supposed to register under composition scheme. Okay. Which will not be before the date of contravention of the provision. From the date you have not followed the provision, from that date he can cancel it. In all these three cases, the taxable person has to furnish a statement within 30 days from the date of withdrawal, a statement of stock. Why? Because whatever you do from composition to regular, you can claim it. So you have to give a statement of your stocks. Clear? Okay. If that is clear, we will take up few questions and answers. Mr. A is obtained a registration of casual taxable person to make a display in his exhibition. His turnover for that exhibition is only 15 lakhs. Whether Mr. A is eligible for the composition scheme? Many are saying yes, but the correct answer is given only by few. Meenu and Gayatri and Arun Kumar have given the correct answer that it is no. Because a casual taxable person cannot register under the composition scheme. And we are saying that this is a composition. He is taking a casual taxable person registration. So Mr. A is not eligible for composition as he is specifically excluded. In our exclusion, people who cannot register under composition scheme, we have seen that a person who is a casual taxable person. So Mr. A is a casual taxable person Even though his turnover is 15 lakhs, he cannot register for composition scheme. Second question. Second question is saying yes. But you have to give reason. This is not a multiple choice question or a single question. You have to give your reasoning. Question number two. What is your answer? Interstate supply is not a part of composition scheme. Not eligible to opt. Again, this is a googly question. This is saying that yes, interstate supplies are not eligible, but interstate supplies of what? Interstate outward supplies. But in this case, dear friends, this is a interstate inward supplies. So he is eligible because composition scheme is applicable subject to condition that the taxable person does not engage in making interstate outward supplies. But here there is no restriction on making any interstate inward supplies. So here he's making a interstate inward supply. So this is not a problem. Be very careful. Each and every term is very important.
Good evening, students. Very right. Deepak sir has explained this point really very well. And this is the important point on which generally we get a question in examination also. And you need to take care that a composition, very good question. Can the composition scheme, as sir told you, that there will be surprises. So the sir has framed these type of, little small questions, so that the key points, gets registered in your mind. And this one is very important point which he has touched upon, that yes, the question is, a composition scheme be availed if taxable person has interweight interstate inward supplies. As what is the, what does the section says, basically composition scheme is not available. A person cannot enter into a composition scheme if they are engaged in interstate outward supplies. So when you will see the table which is given in the end of this chapter, charge of GST, let us recapitulate section, who are not eligible to opt for composition scheme. It is stated that whether the composition scheme we talk about section 10(1) or section 10(2)(a), supplier engaged in making any interstate outward supplies, whether of goods or of services, they are not eligible to opt for composition scheme. But the point to note here is that the composition scheme is applicable subject to the condition does not engage in outward supplies. So there is no restriction on making any interstate inward supplies. So if a person has made some interstate inward supplies from then a composition scheme can be availed on the same, right? Only the restriction is there in case of outward supplies, outward interstate supplies. Composition scheme generally a very important, also I will say that yes, most of the times we get the questions with the application based questions, or we get the testing of few provisions in the main computation question as well, or an independent question sometimes comes on the analysis based application based questions. So composition scheme is generally, it has been seen that it appears that yes, it carry the good weightage in the examination. Now, I will just touch upon the key points which you just since we are in the process of revision. So let me also involve in it, and let me revise with you the significant points which you need to keep in mind in case of composition scheme. So students, as you know that it is always given in the question paper at the top of the paper that rate of GST is not expected from students. Rate of GST, whatever is the actual rate of GST, that is always given in the question paper, and you have to apply the rate whatever is given in the question paper. But rate of GST, rate of tax in case of composition levy, this general statement does not apply to rate of tax in case of composition levy. In case of composition levy, students are expected to be aware of the correct rate of tax which is applicable in case of composition levy under section 10(1). This rate will not be given to you in the examinations. For example, if it is given that manufacturer other than manufacturer of notified goods, so you need to bear in mind that half percent of the turnover in the state is applicable rate of CGST, right? So if total rate of GST or the total amount of GST payable is asked, then you have to apply half percent of CGST plus half percent of SGST, and effective rate will be 1%. Similarly, in case of restaurant service, the rate of GST which is applicable is 2.5% of CGST, and in total GST rate, effective rate of GST will be 5%. And any other supplier who is eligible for composition scheme under section 10 of CGST, which is not covered under this, serial number 1 and 2, which is given in the study material, the applicable rate is 1.5% of turnover, and the point to note is 0.5% of turnover of taxable supplies. So only and only taxable supplies will be included in by determining the rate, and 0.5% of turnover of taxable supplies of CGST, right? So this 0.5% rate is only of CGST. In effect, if you talk about the effective rate of GST comprising of both CGST and SGST, or it is a case of interstate supplies where IGST is levied, then the effective rate will be 1%, right? So effective rate is 1% in case of manufacturer or any other person, but the difference is how this 1% is calculated. In case of manufacturers other than manufacturer of notified goods, the effective rate is calculated 1% of the turnover, right? And in case of any other supplier like trader, the rate is 1% of turnover of taxable supplies. So this is a point which you need to bear in mind. And another point to note is a registered person opted for composition scheme must not be engaged in manufacture of notified goods. See, a list of items which are notified are given to you in study material. So, to opt for composition scheme, a registered person must not be engaged in manufacture of these notified goods. A composition scheme can be opted if he is involved in trading of these notified goods. So if the I hope you are able to understand the difference. If a person is involved in trading of notified goods, then if a person is involved in trading of notified goods, then a composition scheme can be opted, but it is not registering person must opting for composition scheme must not be engaged in manufacture of notified goods, right? So I hope that we have covered the key points which are there in case of composition scheme. Most important is this only, that composition supplier cannot collect tax, and the composition scheme supplier cannot enter into the input tax credit sheet, right? And another thing is that the option to pay tax under composition scheme, this is effective from the beginning of the financial year. You cannot opt for this composition scheme during the year. You have to opt for it during the beginning of the financial year. Further, with this, we just end the chapter charge of GST, and in this chapter, what we have learned is the composition levy, including the reverse charge supply, the services which are taxable under reverse charge, with the circulars on directors' remuneration. That is also an important one, where it says that if the salary is it is taxable under section 194J, then basically there are two components of salary, and if the salary there are two components of salary, and where it is said that tax salary is where we pay salary to the independent director, they are not who are not employees of the said company in lieu of remuneration, then they are outside the scope of schedule 3, because schedule 3 covers the services provided by employee to the employer. Then the reverse charge mechanism is applicable, so this circular is also important. And then the services which are taxable under reverse charge, we have covered the amendments which are there in case of services which are taxable under reverse charge, because for September 2025 examination and the January 26 examination, for September 25 particularly, amendments till 28th of Feb 2025 will be applicable. So there were two amendments which I covered in the previous session, and sir has also covered, right? And then we will say that yes, I had already emphasized that you please pay attention to the relevant definitions, as well as we have already discussed the definition of renting, right? Then the inter and intra-state supplies, levy and collection, this thing. Then from the next session we will learn the place of supply. Place of supply is very important for determination whether the service will be, it will be in the nature of interstate supply or the intrastate supply. So we hope that we have covered all the provisions. In case you have any query, you may ask us through this question answers queries login session, and you can also mail us. And once again, I would like to repeat that yes, your feedback is very important for us. It helps us in improvement. It helps us in knowing that yes, we are whether the intention of these live virtual classes, the motto behind conducting these live virtual classes, are we able to achieve it or not? We are here to help you. So students, please give a feedback of each and every session, and please stay in touch. Please join these sessions beforehand, and in the next session we will start with the place of supply. So all the best, and I hope that you are just learning side by side. You are just have you once you know the topic, you just beforehand you read the introductory paragraphs, read the few pages of the study material, so that you have an idea. When sir starts teaching, then you can then you just can sit with the study material with you, so that you are able to correlate what he is teaching, and you can side by side mark the important points which he's emphasizing, which he's laying stress upon. So you can emphasizing the important key areas and analysis. You can also make a few notes. You can write in the you can add sticky notes and write in your own language whatever you feel that yes, I need to take care of these points, whatever sir tells you. So students, okay, please in the next session, please beforehand just go through the provisions of place of supply, and keep sharing your feedback. Thank you.